Just not getting it.
Welcome everybody out there in podcast land. The Good Times with Good People Company proudly presents the Loft Party Podcast, where it is always about good times, good people, and good talk. Good. Now that you've received your invitation, join us. Grab a cocktail, light a cigar, or whatever you like to smoke. Tell a friend, and welcome to the party. I'm your host and moderator, Rio, and let's introduce today's panel. We've got our returning champions, Chris O'Connor. He's the co-owner of Liquid 9 Broadcast Media. Dave Elliott, we call him Big Dave. He's the owner of C&P Construction. Brian Massey, he's a market analyst for True Media and our resident Brain Mass. We have also got Patrick Miller. He is the hacker. That's all I can tell you about what he does. And the anonymous female, because she doesn't want you to know her name. And today, on the Loft Party Podcast, we are talking about we the people. Have these sour grapes protests turned into the resistance? So I got a lot of things I was looking at online that I put down here as kind of show points for us to touch on. And as always, since we've gotten into the Trump era, I want to touch on something that was at least considered an alternative fact until, of course, we got the real facts. And so let's start with the mosque shooting in Quebec. Fox News had tweeted and then reported that the shooter was originally a Muslim of Moroccan descent, and come to find out he was just a French-Canadian white guy who happens to really love the American president and has nothing to do with any terrorist ties. And it took the government of Canada tweeting and writing Fox News repeatedly before they would retract, and then writing again a pretty stern letter to get them to actually remove the original tweets. I thought this was just kind of outrageous, because the press secretary, Sean Spicer, had said that, that the Quebec shootings, this is the reason that we're doing the, they were trying not to call it a Muslim ban at the time when he said it, but this is the reason that we're restricting travel from some of these nations. And then it turned out that this wasn't even a Muslim or even anybody from a Muslim nation that did the shooting in the first place. So I'm sure everybody has at least heard this one. And I want to start by asking Patrick, your thoughts on such.
Well, accuracy matters. I think in a lot of the situation we see with, I'll kind of abstract the discussion for just a minute and bear with me. We deal a lot with what's called threat intelligence. Mm-hmm. And when we receive information about any particular threat, it comes with a degree, a confidence level. So this is really early, unconfirmed, just early warning, right? It takes a much longer time, in some cases days, weeks, or months, before they can actually come back and say, absolutely confirmed, we know they're basically what are called TTPs, or their methods, so to speak. Accuracy takes time. And I think, unfortunately, in this case, they're trying to rush as quickly as they can to claim the oxygen in the room with whatever story they want to push. And I think I'm seeing more of a tendency in certain forms of media to take that that approach that lawyers take when they say it and they know it's going to get objected, they know it's going to get stricken from the record, but
they want to strike first blood.
Yeah. Everybody heard it, and it's going to flavor their perception. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're seeing is kind of a push to do that now, knowing that they may well get publicly roasted, but all that will be forgotten for the fact those first impressions were heard, and often everything else after that will be ignored because what they wanted to hear was what they heard first. So I think, it's arguably an unscrupulous tactic. It's done in a lot of professions that are considered to be quite rigorous, like the legal profession. So saying that it's something you should or shouldn't do, I think really isn't arguable. It's what happens. I think the challenge is now how do we actually correct the mistakes in a manner that can get to the people that need to understand that what was originally heard was not, in fact, was not just false, but was intentionally false. Because I think that's part of the message. Is it just false, but it's intentionally false? Is I think the concern that I've got is there malice in the fact that it was done the way it was?
Yeah, I guess that is truly my concern, but I think that is the broader concern. Like, I don't know if there's one news agency that hasn't had to print a retraction, but did they make the mistake on purpose, or was there just a mistake in the reporting and then they had to print a retraction? Mm-hmm. But it seems as if here lately we're getting more and more instances where it feels like you say, like in a courtroom when, the lawyer knows there's going to be an objection, but he knows he needs to strike first blood. Mm-hmm. So he just throws it out there. But like I say, now you can't unhear it. Yeah. The judge can say, jurors don't consider that, but you've heard it now. And how much does that, flavor, I guess the zeitgeist of what everybody's thinking and feeling out there?
I would pose the question that, is it happening more, or are we paying attention now?
That's actually a really good question. Let's go to our historian at the table.
Well, these things have been around since, the start of politics, so everybody does this. I mean, if you read some of the letters, again, from the founding fathers, which I love that term, who all despise each other. They said horrific things about each other, absolute slander and lies, had them published in newspapers, knowing that they couldn't be retracted, and then, et cetera, et cetera. So my bigger concern is not so much that a falsehood got out there by the news. I expect that, especially in this day and age where you have to be first with the story or you are last. And so you are willing to guess because somebody tweeted it, and so you don't want to be the only people not on the story, and so it makes for just a ridiculous scenario. And to call it news anymore, I think, is doing a disrespect to the word news. And to be perfectly honest, I never really thought news was news anyway. You always come at news with a bias of some sort, so it's impossible not to. So. But you should try to make sure your facts are right, but you can't do that anymore in this day and age. It's impossible.
Yeah,
so
the
you
news
take your best
cycle
guess.
is so possibly short.
It's an entertainment division of the networks. That's what it is.
Which is kind of shameful to me,
Why? I mean, they lost money on it for years and didn't do them any good.
Well, yeah, it always, the news division was always a loss leader at any network. It was just
not a Fox. They kill it. Yeah, no, I mean, Fox Cable is always the number one rated cable network that's out there.
Where was CNN before the Gulf War?
Absolutely.
They actually turned 24-hour news into a thing. It was suddenly not just the thing you did, whether you had the weather and the sports, and you might tell people what to do about the upcoming leaf problem or something. Yep. But yeah, there was no real 20. It was morning maybe during noon or lunchtime, and then at night you'd watch the.
Well, and CNN was the first to make it entertainment. They would give each crisis a name, a catchy name with a theme song and a graphic.
And a signed reporter that was the lead. And
I guess my thing is, and again, to use the lawyer analogy, well, a lawyer has an obligation to do the absolute best job they can to defend their client, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so I just find that in some ways advocating, and that's a strategy that you can use. I have a harder time when you're basing foreign policy on it. Which should not be held to that. So you're not advocating just one side at that point. You have millions of people's lives at stake here, and that would just be ridiculous.
Well, look at the 6 o'clock news on the local level. As soon as that news comes on, what does it say? Breaking news.
Yeah.
Every single one of them got breaking news. So what it boils down to, all these news organizations have a hand grenade. As soon as they got an inkling, they pull the pin and chuck it and let it blow up. And so they can be the first one out there. And then unfortunately, they don't fact check like they should, or they have a narrative that they want to put out there to fit their political agenda, because it's no longer about journalism, it's about commentary. In a lot of ways. They're reporting the news, but they're reporting it in their commentary way. And so they're going to throw it out there and let it come back, and then it may bounce around 2 or 3 different ways. It may be found out to be true. It may be found out to be false. It may be found out to have half truths and half lies on either side.
Yeah.
But really, that's what it is anymore. With Keith and Christy, it's about entertainment.
Yeah,
it's about creating an entertainment narrative.
I guess that's, to me, thinking about what you were saying, Chris, I think you might be right. It may have always been there, but I think that, at one point anyway, there was the news, and then there was the commentary or the editorial, and so clearly it was like clearly delineated that this is an opinion. Yeah, this is an opinion.
Channel 9 used to be real good at it. They go through their news, and at the end of the day, their editor would come on and have a comment.
Well, but that's exactly my point. I mean,
that was old school journalism.
You literally just said the magic word right there, which is why it has never been truly not op-ed to begin with, is because there's an editor involved in some way that selectively gets to pick what stories you get to hear or not hear, how it's told, the point of view that it comes from.
That has been true historically, but I would say that's actually changed with the advent of the internet and blogging, podcasting.
Nobody can fire you.
Right. There's a lot of folks
that hire and fire
like Brian Krebs does his own stuff, completely self-funded, and has been swatted, threatened by several different forms of mafia. So I think there's a certain degree of independence in there. That said, it doesn't come with the clout or stigma, depending upon your perspective, of a major news organization.
Right. I mean, they still pretty much gear what our conversations are at the water cooler a lot of times. And I think that's becoming less and less, especially as distribution channels become free, which is nice. I mean, that's one of the advantages of the internet. Another disadvantage of the internet is the distribution channel's free. Mm-hmm. So every Yahoo in the world can say shit that's not true, and because you read it somewhere, you believe that it's true.
They're going to do that anyway.
And I completely agree. So, and I think they do that already with the 3 cable news channels. You pick the one that you try to agree with the most and just stick with it and go, see, people agree with them. The facts are there. And it's always been nonsense. And again, my dad used to always tell this joke. He's like, an American and a Russian got in a race, and the American won. And so America reported that the American won the race, and the Russians said that the American came in second to last. Which both are true. It is literally how you want to say that.
Just how you spin the facts.
So whatever your point of view is.
I think no matter what side you're on, given the way we are reporting information today, and even if this is mainstream or non-mainstream, you have to have a buffer. You have to give yourself a little bit of caching time. Don't immediately assume whatever you read is automatically at face value. Give it a little bit of time to cook. It's fine to start thinking about it. It's fine to kind of chew on it. But if you harden an opinion within seconds after reading something, which if you're already positioned that way, you're going to do that anyway. But I would caution those that are maybe approaching that space, that are not there yet, to let things let it cook for a minute till reality eventually surfaces, because you'll find that the truth eventually finds its way. It's just very hard to keep the truth from showing. It is the only thing in this world that can reverse entropy like nothing
A
else.
version of the truth will find its way out.
And when the internet started doing
Enough
this,
versions will show you where the center is.
yeah, I was kind of guilty of that. I would take something and go, squawk!
Yeah.
And I'd send it out to somebody, sometimes DW, and then I'd just get whacked down. And I said, oh, okay. I guess I should have looked and waited a little while before I went, squawk!
Maybe another version of that is be skeptical. Just give yourself a healthy dose of skepticism, not a minor flavor, but a healthy. Right now is a really good time to embrace skepticism. No matter
but
where you are.
The thing is, like everyone at this table, like we're critical thinkers, which is part of that, right? It's part of going into something and saying, well, does this make sense? Actually stopping, and then you also have to think of these sites or news channels. They go through a cycle. Right, they say, well, who is our demographic that's watching this?
Yeah.
So we want to kind of appeal to them because we want to keep them.
Who's a demographic that keeps our advertisers happy?
Exactly. And as that happens, then it starts this engine. And the way it works is, right, then, so we're giving them what they kind of want to see, and this is the thing that they're wanting to see, so let's give them more of it. And then it starts the cycle because now what they're saying, they say, yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to keep watching this. And then it gets more and more extreme. And over time, it gets to the point, I think, where we are now. But if we were critical thinkers, everyone was thinking of it that way, saying, well, maybe I should do more research than just watch this one channel or look at this one site, then things would even out.
I think at one point in history, there may have been a slight lean, a little bit more conservative or a little bit more liberal, but we were dealing with basically one set of facts, and I think that's the problem. I think that's really now
I completely disagree.
Same
and
fact.
I'll cite a historical example that most people still believe today. Most people think that the news organizations conspired to make sure that Americans didn't know that Roosevelt had polio and couldn't walk. In fact, almost every American knew that he was in a wheelchair and couldn't walk. That's the biggest scam in American history. everybody know it.
I just
we
want to
always
say
cite it as an example of, well, like how the journalists worked back then and blah,
But
blah,
it's
blah.
kind of like out of
Everybody
sight, out of mind.
No,
Like,
it was very visible. Look at
I thought it was Roswell.
Roswell might be too,
Oh,
but I
okay.
mean, it's just you tell a story enough times, right, wrong, or indifferent, it becomes part of American folklore.
But that's also in the Demagoguery Handbook 101.
Sure,
The
absolutely.
critical thinking, the problem with critical thinking for a lot of folks is everybody's in the now. Critical thinking requires time and work. You have to go and take the time to go back and look at different things and get different opinions before you can really do it.
It takes that, but let me add another piece that it actually takes you for just a moment to actually step outside your emotions.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are emotionally tied to these things in some very visceral ways that flavor the way they think and put up those filters that don't allow them to accept anything else, even if they gave it that much time.
Sure.
Well,
that's very true.
then you're too dialed into your own ideology.
Yeah, but
And there are a lot of folks
But there's
like
no amount of
that
news that's going to steer those people one way or the other. They're already set in that path.
There's a lot of them should sit in on a
Everybody has
podcast
an
and we could teach them
emotional
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Everybody's
you're right on that, Chris. I think everybody has where their emotional hot button is. I think some people
have a really big button.
Yeah, it's like that's what it is. Some people's button is just really, really big and really broad.
Those damn millennials.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, I can sit here.
I don't
and
think it's all millennials.
I honestly don't give a shit if car manufacturing goes overseas. What do I care? But I didn't just lose my job in Toledo, that I worked at for 30 years and have my pension thread. So there's just different hot buttons for everybody, and to avoid the emotions on the things that are the most important to you is exceptionally difficult.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I can sit here and tell you a million reasons why GM left Toledo because it's a shitbag, but
Yeah, I was going to say, have you been to Toledo?
Cars cheaper.
No offense out there to any listeners in Toledo, but look out your window. It's Toledo.
Yeah, you're in northern Wichita. So, but I mean, if you're in Toledo and you work there forever, then that is all of a sudden your hot button. And I get it.
I struggle with the maybe it's just me, and I've been self-contained and do-it-yourself guy my whole life, but anytime you blame somebody else, there's always three fingers pointing back at you. And I think that we're in a very heavy blame situation where it's always somebody else's fault. It's always something else going on. And those folks in Toledo, okay, you saw this coming. I'm sorry, but this was on your radar 10 years ago. You had 10 years to get retrained into some kind of safety net. I'm not saying that you are solely to blame, but you got some culpability in that problem right there.
Some blame
Wherever
involved,
Toledo or
right?
anywhere else unless it just happens overnight and it was so disruptive you had absolutely no capability to save yourself from that situation, then shame on you.
And I know people, and I really despise when people make rules based on personal examples and personal anecdotes. But I did see it firsthand. The one time when I've laid people off and I gave them 90 days notice. I usually walk people out immediately and go, you gotta go. But this one group I really liked, I'm like, I'll give you the 90 days, go look for a job. One person out of the entire group of 200 found a job. The rest of them sat around and did nothing but bitch and moan, did a shit job, and then ended up stealing a ton of shit and fucking up
toxic.
my computer. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible. I'm like, dude, you had a chance. I will never do it again.
No, this thing is lay them off, give them 90-day severance, and then you're the hero and you
Fine
help
with
them
that,
out,
too.
and they're not toxic to your company.
Yeah, I used to really feel like, companies that are just like, hey, come in the office, I need to talk to you, and they just hit you with the, we're going a different direction, here's your severance package. I used to think that was some real a-hole stuff, but, I've known several people, even people really close to me, that when they knew that the change was coming, like you said, they did really horrible jobs. They destroyed the computers. They did everything that they could do, thinking some crazy thinking, but thinking that the company was going to see that the way that it's being done now is better, and we don't need this change. So if we keep breaking this stuff, they'll just stop replacing it.
I just think they felt like they were being wronged.
Well, and they did, but the real problem was
They burned the bridge.
it was just they
Don't
didn't want to.
bridge.
Yeah,
You
they
might
didn't
need
want
it
to do it.
again.
You'll always need it.
I will say the flip side.
That is the worst thing that you can do. I have many people leave my company and come back to work for me because they go out there and think it's greener on the other side and they can make a bunch more money. Next thing you know, they come back.
But
Those who have burned their bridge
Yeah.
rarely get to come back with me.
Yeah.
Those who have said, hey, I think, I got a better opportunity out here, I'm going to shake that person's hand and wish them luck.
Sure.
And then tell them that if it doesn't work out, you come back and see me someday.
Sure.
That's the whole difference.
Makes sense.
And I've had guys come back and beg for the job that burned the bridge with me.
I will say the flip side of that story was they wanted the president of the company to be there for this mass round of layoffs and all this kind of stuff. So they flew in on a private jet, stayed down at the Ritz-Carlton, had this nice lunch catered in.
What's the optics on that one?
And then we went through and fired everybody, and then they got back on their private jet and went back to Pennsylvania.
Oof.
So I'm like, you guys really did this entirely wrong.
Flying on Southwest and taking
Flying
over.
on Southwest.
It might have been a bad
sandwich.
Might not have been a good idea.
So there's rights and wrong ways to do things. But, oh well, sorry. Let's see if you want to get back on track.
Actually, there was a couple of things that I put down here that I actually I'm going to skip, and if we have time, I'm going to come back to, and I'm going to go straight to Donald Trump and his call list. First, hanging up on Mexico and Australia, and not only hanging up on them, threatening to send troops into Mexico. I was just like, what is wrong with this man?
Okay, explain this. I didn't hear about him hanging up on him. Or is that just a term you use?
No.
He literally
He did.
hung up
He hung
on
up.
them.
The call was scheduled for an hour with Australia, which is literally like our second closest
They've
ally.
been in every war with us.
Yeah. And
they're
was
one of
our
five
closest
one of
ally.
five countries that we share intelligence with.
yeah, and
Yeah.
after 25 minutes, he literally says to the Australian Prime Minister, "This is the worst call I've been on all day," and hangs up. It's just, I'm like, what is wrong with this man? I don't understand. And during the call with Mexico, you know, he tries to triple down on the wall, and the Mexican president is like, absolutely not. And the conversation gets heated for a moment, and then he basically threatens to send troops in, like,
in the most insulting
what?
way.
Yeah,
he said,
yeah.
he goes, if you can't take care of your bad hombres,
Yes,
then I'll
yes.
send some troops down to do it for you. Which, I mean, you could not be more insulting.
Yeah, I was just like, what?
Now, I want to refer to Keith and I were up there the other night and Keith had an enlightening idea, because the wall is expensive. The wall is a bad idea. Keith, being in his business, understands a lot of different things and how different things can be won. So I'm going to refer to Keith on a great idea on how to handle the border that makes a lot of sense. And then also maybe tie it in with my idea of putting some National Guard down there. At 18, my idea has always been, I've done this for years, at 18 you can go into National Guard. You won't fight in a war unless everything goes to shit. Everything goes to shit, we're all going to be fighting in it. But you're going to do a 2-year deployment down there, and you're going to be able to learn surveillance, you're going to be able to learn warehousing, you're going to be able to build things. I mean, there's lots of things you can learn down there. Logistics, cyber, there's a ton of things. So you could use that for your resource. And then Keith's idea is...
Yeah, I don't argue that there's a problem. We have to make sure we know who's coming in and out of the borders. It's just a reality. We have to know that.
Yeah,
any country.
Yeah,
does
any
and
country
should.
does. Yeah.
I just think that this isn't early history China trying to keep the Mongol hordes out. I think that we've got a lot of technology that could save us a lot of the problem. Just solve the problem with technology. I mean, you throw up a mesh of drones, one goes down, it's replaced by other mesh drones. These things can fly for weeks without fuel. There's ways to build a surveillance network that could detect a scorpion moving across that desert line, and you'll know whether it is a scorpion or a human. That's harder to dig around. That's harder to dig over. I mean,
So what about crossing? If your drone crosses into international airspace, what happens then?
where's the international airspace?
Well, because over Mexico.
Over Mexico.
Because so much of the, particularly the drug trafficking, was happening in these elaborate tunnels.
You're not allowed to go in their airspace.
No. So I understand.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I wonder if drones would be effective in picking up the people who are coming through tunnels and things along those lines.
Yeah.
Since you can't get to it at the origin,
Yeah.
you would have to be able to find the exit point, and that's not
Well,
always
I mean,
easy
a
to
wall
do.
isn't going to be effective at that either.
Listen, I think
Yeah.
a wall is just idiotic. I mean, I'm all in favor of open borders with Mexico and Canada.
I mean, they've made, haven't they made
nonsense.
tunnels from Mexico all the way into California?
Oh yeah.
That's
I mean,
my
yeah.
point.
But those
If
can
you
be
can't
detected
fly-
with the right technology.
If
That's
you can't fly a
incredible.
drone over
So
over
you
Mexican
pound
airspace,
ground
it's tough.
sensing. There's basically ground sensors that can run. Get into the physical security side of things. I can tell if someone is walking up by how far, based using ground sensors, if it's a human, if it's a vehicle, how big the human is, how fast they're approaching, just by using ground sensing technologies. So there's already the technology to do everything we're trying to do, whether it's detect them digging, detect them trying to go over something. We have motion sensing, heat sensing, signal sensing. If they use any kind of communication device, we're going to pick that up as well. We have technology to do this right now in such an inexpensive way that could be deployed not just along that border, but any war zone we might go into to protect our troops wherever they might be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no longer a need for a physical boundary in any way, shape, or form. And if you need to, arm the drones in other areas. I mean, there's lots of potential there that we could actually transform our capabilities militarily and in the homeland instead of putting that money into a wall.
But
So
you
I
know,
just think it's easy.
how do you optically, maybe that's not the word I want to use, people are so scared and so anti-drone, especially in the United States.
Unless they're
how
honest.
do you?
How
do you?
Fact alive.
It is, but just as people are protesting having a wall, they're going to protest using drones. So it's,
I think a handful of people would protest that. I think the people who would protest that would be people like me who just say, I just want open borders and I don't, I really don't want to jack.
When you're a protester,
you're about to have Amazon be dropping your packages off by a drone. I mean, there's going to be mass acceptance of drone usage here pretty quick. So unless
I think it's just a different monster when it's military.
But between your protesters are out there, and these are your protesters saying, no borders, no nation, stop deportation. Really? No borders, no nation, stop deportation. That is insane.
I'm kind of
now I understand. Now I'll be the first to say that's a minority group of people, and they're set out to rabble rouse. And this is what they are. And but some of them believe this.
I believe in
that
it.
they should just be able to pass back and forth and nothing happens.
I believe in it 1,000%.
I'm actually not too far from it. Money doesn't care anymore. Packets don't care. The internet doesn't care. Comms don't care. We are now one big fat round planet. There is no end of this boat that isn't sinking without the whole thing going.
The fact that we found a random river and decided to call it a line, when those boundaries shift constantly throughout history. When you say it's a nation, I mean, literally, we're just drawing lines along rivers and going, mine, and then you kick out something else like,
well, my problem comes down to that is taxes.
And I think if you did
that's I have to pay the taxes.
I'm not saying unifying 3 different governments in North America would not be an easy thing to do. I'm saying it would be a difficult thing to do, but it's a very doable thing. Just to say it's difficult doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. And, again, I always love the example that everybody gets pissed off in Mexico, but nobody's like really fighting Canada. Canada's a bunch of a-holes. Like, they're harder to get in and out of than anywhere else.
Oh, God.
Have you tried to get up to Canada?
Yeah.
It's the longest freaking process at the border.
In Canada, if you have a disability, they're not going to let you in. And I've been across that border a bunch of times. If you have a DWI, they're not going to let you in. Canada's very restrictive who they let in.
Sure.
And if America had the policy with disability that Canada has, oh my God. You want to talk about protest?
Again, I think there's things to adjust, but it's an inevitability. We're not going to see it in our lifetime, but we will see it a couple lifetimes from now, where this world is shrinking so fast that borders no longer make sense.
I think it's your economic. Basically, it's going to come down to where do you identify so you can pay taxes. Is what it comes down to.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you physically live there X amount of time or where you're going to be. I think air travel is only going to increase. It's going to speed up. All of this is going to take away the concept of physical location as a delimiting factor.
Yeah.
And it's really expensive. I mean, just the amount of money that goes into making sure
that a border, that a river is protected.
I mean, at some point we need to get to a stage, and this is probably in the future, facial recognition says, taxpayer for X region, you're not paying your taxes. What are you doing? Or not, we're going to deport you, but you're here. What are you doing here? Are you paying your taxes for being here if you're earning your money? If you're a tourist, different situation. You're already paying your taxes because you're paying your tourism taxes.
Sure.
But if it really comes down to that, I think that's actually not that hard.
Do you think it's a world order that we're heading for?
Well, I'm not saying that it's going to be here tomorrow, but at some point, we're all going to have to agree on localization feeding into some bigger global system.
Right.
I mean,
I started having animal farm issues.
I get it. We have a microcosm of it here, and we have
because then you get an elite class that tries to control.
We still have state versus fed, and you can have those things, and you can have areas where things are still different.
I'm not sold on. Maybe I'm getting old. But I'm having trouble.
I think we'll be driven there by economics at some point.
I think we're imagining the world as it is now, and not where it is inevitably headed because of technology and things along those lines. It is a shrinking world, and it just is, and things are, the barriers that prevent it right now are going away swiftly.
I think everything is changing due to technology. Coming from the music and Chris from entertainment industries. 10, 15 years ago, artists, if you had a hit, a moderate hit record, you probably were gonna sell platinum. You were probably going to sell platinum. If you had a decent hit, you were going to sell 2 or 3 times platinum. If you had a smash hit, you were going to sell, 7 or 8 times platinum. Now these same artists, if they sell platinum at all, is a very, very difficult feat, because streaming is now the way music is consumed. And I think that technology is going to, like I say, it may not be our lifetime, but I think technology is shrinking the world we live in ways that we don't even know yet, is going to happen. But I definitely know one of the main reasons that, like I say, these companies leave is because the economy has become global, and the worker in another country, can work for cheaper. And no, that's not necessarily good for the American worker, but I do tend to agree with Patrick that at some point, was it a surprise that the factory closed, or that the steel mill closed, or that you didn't notice that they weren't pressing LPs anymore? They were starting to press CDs. You didn't notice that they weren't pressing LPs, they were pressing cassettes. You didn't notice that they were not pressing 8-tracks. It's just at a certain point, we have to notice the shifts in the climate.
My 8-tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing.
The writing on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, and we may not necessarily like the writing on the wall, but I think we better see it. We otherwise, you are kind of doomed to just be living whatever's left for you.
This is the most innovative country on the planet, and we can innovate better and faster than anywhere else. I think these people need to get off the blame game and put on their innovation hat and do what we do best.
Yeah,
We have shown over and over and over we will out innovate anybody. Whether they steal it and use it against us at some point, different discussion.
Yep.
But we will out innovate anybody, and we got to get out of this pity party and get back into that America first. America innovates first.
I'll agree with you on that.
We will out innovate anybody. Guarantee it.
Here's
Make
one.
innovation cheaper, and it will make us more money in the long run.
amen.
Here's a small microcosm of something that bothered me, though. And call me an isolationism, whatever. But in the Sunday paper, Del Lamb is a good organization. I mean, God bless them. They are honestly trying to help people from other places in the world, bring them here and get them settled. And due to Trump's ban, there was a Somalian family that was supposed to come here. They had a house rented for them. It was a bungalow, and they were standing in the house, and a pretty nice house. And so you're trying to bring a Somali family over here and set them up to do well. And I'm looking around, I'm going, I got a homeless mother, 3 kids living in a cot. I got a lot of problems here. I got homeless vets that we might be able to help out a little bit more. And so, call me a homer, but I kind of think we have a lot of problems here on our own soil with our own people that I want to see solved first. I want to see us do a better job at taking care of these type of people. This homeless mother may have not been making much money, and somebody jacked the rent on her, and all of a sudden she ends up in her car, sleeping in her car with their kids, trying to get by. I think these are the people that I want to help before I help somebody from a foreign country.
And I'll give you a flip side to that. I think there are, and here's what I find ironic. I think there are more Republicans who vote against American safety nets than anywhere else. Which I find just staggering. I also think there's already, despite Republicans voting against the hundreds of American safety nets that are out there, there are still hundreds of safety nets that are
There's
out there.
a lot of them.
There's a shit ton of them, and so it's the same argument I have when somebody goes and shoots up a theater. I'm like, you don't need a new gun law, you need to enforce the 35 that are on the books.
Absolutely.
That's an illegal gun.
Absolutely. There's plenty of them in place.
Don't call it stupid Jimmy's Law because Jimmy was a cute little 7-year-old who got shot in a theater. We don't need another stupid law like that. We just need to enforce the ones that are already there.
That's just that's just to make some congressman or senator look good.
Well, I agree, but what I would say is, listen, if you're in Somalia, that shit doesn't exist. I mean, we're talking poverty. Poverty in America is defined as a one-car cable television household, with
has a mobile phone,
absolutely a decent income, all these kinds of things.
They get a lot of things, but we still have problems in that aspect.
Not saying that we don't.
Cracks.
What I'm saying is that at some point, there's a giant crack. Somalia is a giant crack, and we have a couple of people falling in between the cracks here with programs in place that are already there that they could take advantage of. So we can find an effective way to steer them there. I'm great with that. But when you are watching mass slaughter people, where they're cutting off their hands so that they can't fight you again, then I feel like there's a moral obligation to step in and try to get those people.
I don't think it has to be one or the other.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that America is very bad about taking care. We have homeless children in Missouri, in Kansas City.
We have a lot of them.
I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other. They're different needs.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way I look at it. I think the need of that Somali family is just as imperative as the need of the homeless single mother in her car. And they both need to be tended to. Now, what I will say is, I think we can definitely do better as far as vets. Personally, just me personally. You get out of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, whatever. I don't see why you should be looking for a place to live. Hey, what's going on, podcasters? Let's acknowledge the good friends of the Loft Party Podcast. The Majestic Restaurant and Pendergast Club, carrying on Kansas City's tradition of great food and great jazz, 931 Broadway in Kansas City, Missouri. The J. Rieger Kansas City Distillery, whiskey, gin, vodka. That is, oh so good. And friend of the podcast and panelist, Lane Boland, managing to keep the podcast going. Apparently wealthy or not. Now onto our regularly scheduled program. I don't see why you should be looking for a job.
Yeah.
I think you come out, there should be a pipeline set up to get you a place to be, to get you at least 2 or 3 interviews set up, 4 jobs, because there's a lot of companies, and I know yours is one of them.
was sitting there the other day when we were with the Kansas City Veterans Coalition.
Yeah.
And they're taking 14 different veterans group in Kansas City and formed them into one, and then got big time sponsors, of which I'm a little small fish in. But this is the goal. We need to have that transition from the military to get these people into jobs.
Why isn't that a branch of the DoD?
So they transition
I would
out.
say, yeah. Because we already spend more than, what is our next,
Yeah.
10 allies combined?
We'll call it healthcare.
Yeah.
But they've got something that looks like healthcare in some cases. It's
Yeah.
not always the greatest.
Not always very good with the VA.
But why don't we have a job placement, a housing? I mean, something.
Yeah.
We should be part of the DoD.
They actually do a lot of that already in place, to be
Well,
perfectly
a
honest.
lot of
And-
companies hire. They prefer if a vet
Our company does.
applies,
Veterans
they
preference.
give
You do that in a
them
minute, won't you?
an
Sure.
interview first.
I know this is a controversial thing that will not go over well. I don't think just because you went into the military that gives you special rights. You took a job. There's a million jobs out there. You chose that one. Congratulations. I don't think there's anything super special about it. Honestly, I just think that's the path you chose, and congratulations. Now you got to do something else. I'm not dishonoring anybody's service. I get it. During the first Gulf War, I went to sign up, and the stupid thing ended. So
that goes
before they even gave me a call.
That goes
but
back.
I will say, listen, I do believe in defending the country, but I do say if you go into it as a career move, I don't know why you're afforded special rights because you went into the military. That one's a hard one for me. You don't get special rights for being a doctor.
How do you feel about the GI Bill?
About what?
GI Bill.
I think it's fine, but those were people who were
So-
drafted. They were drafted into World War II and came back, so they didn't actually have a choice. We're talking right now about a voluntary
Volunteer
army
army.
that we've had in the United States, where these people are choosing to go into it, as I would choose to go into the job that I have and the job I had before. We've all chosen to go into jobs.
But there should
when
be
you
a
choose-
reward for service.
No, there shouldn't be.
Absolutely, there should be.
In my mind,
My reward is they actually learn some really good skills.
yeah,
They usually have a better work ethic. They understand lots of different things.
Which is why I kind of agree with you that that should be the DoD. It's not like there's some special charity out there. Like, this is all part of the pipeline. Like, if you choose this career, the pipeline afterward is set up to at least help you transition back into civilian life.
And that's
you don't
what
think it feels like there's a
KCBC is all
shit ton of
about.
special preference for veterans and stuff like that? And there's a lot. I think there's a lot.
I mean, I think there are a lot of programs for veterans.
Sorry, Brian, there's not making for sure.
No, I was thinking I'd like to just know the numbers between it. So take all the homeless. What percentage of homeless are veterans? And then how does that compare to the number of people in the military compared to the workforce?
Right.
Is there a huge disparity in those ratios?
You should be able to go back and look at what the First Lady and Biden did. That was their whole thing. One of their biggest platforms military families and what happens to them when they come back from service. So I'm sure there's all kinds of information
I was
out
thinking
there.
about there's one of the professors at KU had just come out last year with a book, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was called From Classroom to I'll have to look it up, but it was he wrote a book about where the military would go to high schools and basically be marketing to these guys on, hey, you should come here, and all the reasons. And it was, I don't know, it was interesting to look at the different strategies that they had and like kind of who they targeted, and sometimes in cases making people feel like they wouldn't succeed in the world if they don't come here. And it was very interesting, and he did a lot of research on it.
And I don't think they're allowed to do that anymore.
I would say as a statistician, I would look up the
Somewhat
average.
predatory?
And again, I think this is a misnomer because every study has shown, most reasonable, non-biased studies have shown that in fact most people that go in the military are better educated than they get credit for, more so than a lot of corporations that are out there. They're not just picking on rural Kansas kids who are stupid as shit with no hope and they drag them in there, or minorities from inner cities who can't find a job. That's not the case. If you look at the military as a whole, that is not the case in any way, shape, or form. So the demographics of the military are actually fairly fascinating when you start digging into it. And there's a super popular belief that they just prey on these dumb kids who just jump in there, and that is not at all remotely true.
Mario, let me bring us back to the phone call.
Yeah.
Look it up if you want.
Yeah.
I haven't hung up on somebody since like high school.
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah, it's definitely been about 12 years since I hung up on somebody.
It would take a lot to really get me to hang up on somebody. I mean, actually, that's not true. I haven't hung up on anybody who wasn't a telemarketer since I was in high school.
Right.
You're killing me. That was my job.
Oh, man, the fact that we've got arguably the number one diplomat. We'll talk about Secretary of State in a different discussion.
Right.
This is the representation of us to the world and our allies that we may need at some point. I mean, you at least have to have a civil conversation with them.
Agreed.
And, in business and in not, I mean, lauds himself as a phenomenal businessman. I deal with business people all the time. I own my company, and there's people I'd rather not do business with, but I still give them the time of day. I still treat them with respect. Even if I would like to hang up on them, and sometimes I'd like to punch them in the face, but I don't do either one of those things.
Right.
Because
And
that's
manage it with
called
civil
being
discourse.
an adult.
Now, however, I do have, every once in a while, I will answer a telemarketer for fun if I'm really feeling
Well,
like
I play with it when I'm drunk.
And this is a good way to deal with them. So right off the bat, they'll start in, and I'll say, wait a second, are you trying to sell me something?
Right.
And I get silence, and then generally no. Okay, well then go ahead.
Right, and keep
And
talking.
as soon as they go ahead, they're trying to sell me something. So then I stop them again real quick and I say, now explain this to me. You told me no, that you weren't trying to sell me something, so now you've lied to me and you're trying to tell me you're going to sell me something. So why would I buy anything from anybody who just lied to me?
Yeah.
And I always enjoy this long drawn out silence that comes from that because it totally befuddles them.
Yeah.
As a guy who ran call centers for
And then I
7
hang up
years,
on
it's,
them.
it's a very tough job, and I always feel bad for the people who are doing it. It's a very,
It's gotta be
very
hard.
demoralizing
It's a tough job, but
if
you
you
like
ever,
to.
if you ever want to get off a call really fast, they always have to give the disclaimer: this call may be recorded for quality assurance. And we're like, good, because I'm recording the call as well. And then they hang up automatically because they can't.
Well, I get hung up on by them
So
sometimes
that
too.
one
Yeah.
works really, really well.
Sometimes
I
it's just
like
too
that.
quick
Thanks
after
for
I
the
say
tip.
it.
Hey, I was going to say, I am going to remember that.
They can't do that.
Nice
They
tip.
can't have their calls recorded by
But
an
it is
outside
fun to screw with them
outside
every
party.
once in a while.
So we just go, good, I'm recording
We've
this
got our
call.
closest neighbor in Mexico, Mexico and Canada. We get a lot of our food from Mexico. We get a lot of things manufactured in Mexico.
Yeah.
Mexico, despite some of the problems they've had, legitimate problems, that's still one of the reasons that we should maintain good dialogue with them.
No,
There's the old
absolutely. They're our
phrase,
neighbor.
you keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. Even if they're your enemy, you still maintain sensible, civil discourse with them. You don't hang up on them and piss them off just to piss them off.
Well, and I will throw this out as a guy, and everybody knows how much I love Mexico. Imagine being in Mexico, and I've used this analogy before, and the only news you get about America is Detroit and Chicago, and you're not feeling so good about going to America at that point either.
Yeah.
You know, all we ever hear about Mexico is the shit that goes wrong, and oh my God, there's a beheading in, Cabo San Lucas or something like that. And again, they do have some.
It doesn't actually happen in Cabo.
It did.
Well,
Actually, they found 12 bodies decapitated outside of Cabo.
when?
This was a couple years back.
No.
Yeah, it's been a while because
Yeah, it
the
has been a
federal has
while.
really cracked down.
So
on
they
it.
did. They cracked down
Yeah.
on all the tourist destinations, and you're safer than a bug on a rug in most of
yeah,
those places.
yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing. Your perception is colored by what you get to hear. And what we get to hear about Mexico is, oh my God, look at all this gang violence.
I love
Well,
it.
it's good if you're in Mexico, and I've seen the Mexican news. It is about Americans killing each other.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what it is. It's crazy.
Most of my Mexican workers, I really like. I call them new Americans
Yeah.
because they are here. They appreciate what we've forgotten to appreciate. They are generally strong family. They're strong Catholic for the most part. So they're involved with each other in their communities and things like this. I can't say enough about some of them. I mean, they are literally my favorite guys that work for me.
It does make it awkward that the Republicans have not been able to make better inroads, and I think they're
They
shooting
smile. They
something,
have
but-
good attitudes. They're happy with me. They're happy I pay them an American wage.
Sure. I'm
These are all
surprised.
things that they come up and shake my hand all the time. I feel great about having them work.
On a
for me.
political level, I find it absolutely staggering that socially there's so much in common between Mexican Americans and the Republican Party, if you really want to get honest, because they are very family oriented. They
Yeah.
generally tend to be religious, stick together. It's a big deal for them, and yet we, as the Republican Party, do everything we can to drive them away and go, okay, we're going to prevent you from seeing your kids. We want to kick you out of here and build a wall now.
They take pride in my business. When I give them gear that says construction and planning on it, man, they want more.
I mean,
They
again,
love to wear my shirts and my
I'm
sweatshirts
with
and everything
you.
else. They like to be identified working for my company.
I'm with you. And above a
Just like,
personal level, I just
you
find
know,
it fascinating.
Rio likes to have his Loft Party Crew shirts on,
Hey, damn
At
right.
a
Podcast land needs to buy them because they're sexy. I mean, they even look sexy on Rio.
At a geopolitical
Hey,
level, I can
I'm
find
pretty sexy out there, man.
That's his time to talk, and you guys keep interrupting him.
It is just a larger theoretical point that I don't know why Republicans don't do more to embrace what is their natural voting bloc and who would align with them 1,000%. You know, like if you're counting on white dudes to keep voting for you, you're not going to be a party that much longer.
So along your lines, some of the tweets that were coming out around that time that Trump hung up and threatened to send troops out of Mexico,
Right.
some of the Mexican tweets were very interesting. And they, to generalize, but a lot of them said stuff like, well, if the wall keeps the Americans out, great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's-
Okay. Speaking of tweets, actually, that's a natural bridge to the next topic. I found out about this Twitter handle called Rogue POTUS.
What's it called?
Rogue POTUS. It may be Rogue White House, but I do believe it's Rogue POTUS.
It's Rogue POTUS.
And so nobody's 100% sure if they're real or if they're just
It's Rogue POTUS staff.
yeah, if it's real or if it's just some people doing some funny tweeting and not sure.
It's not, because even on here it says we will block anyone who asks us to ID ourselves, including press, and who makes suggestions of violence. And they put on here, do not make suggestions of violence towards the president or his family. We will block you. They're not trying to be bad. They're just telling you what's really going on.
Yeah. So with Rogue POTUS staff, so apparently, I've heard from a few of the talking heads out there that it's kind of the inside baseball of the Trump administration at this point is kind of like the Lord of the Flies. It's you've kind of got two or three of the kind of heads of the Republican Party, and they're trying to work with the staff, but they don't like his staff. And then you've got Trump and his staff and cabinet people that don't like the Republican people, and so they kind of tweet the behind the scenes of what these conversations really sound like. And it's hilarious and scary as hell because some of the stuff that they're saying that they say to each other, I'm just like, how could you possibly want to be in the same building with these people if this is how you feel? Because nobody likes each other, period. I think Trump and Bannon, and then and everybody else is basically the way it feels.
Bannon needs to go away. I mean, I'm kind of more of a Trump supporter in some ways, not totally by any stretch of the imagination, but Bannon needs to go away. I mean, Bannon's a bad hire. I mean, he just is, and sooner or later, my hope is that we're in the infancy of what the Trump administration is, and hopefully, as that goes down the road, that part goes away as soon as the things start to wise up on them. And reality starts to hit them in the head like a baseball bat. Who knows? I know that's something we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know yet. But
we can look back on a lot of other presidents who had bad people that they brought in to start off right off the bat.
Well, I think the problem with Bannon,
and they didn't have good advisors in that situation, and they tend to go away.
I think the problem with Bannon was he was his chief strategist for his campaign. So they would put Kellyanne Conway out there to kind of take the slings and arrows on the news programs, but Bannon was the one creating the strategy.
Oh, absolutely.
And so he figured, hey, he got me in the White House, I'm going to bring him on to my staff, and it looks ugly.
I would just throw this out just as a historical context, and I apologize for it, but I would just say, historically, this is nothing new. I mean, if you even go back, the greatest example of probably the most infighting you've ever seen in a presidential cabinet happened under Lincoln, because he brought together every different parties thinking this is going to be great,
He did.
And it was horrific infighting. It was almost a dysfunctional unit for a very long time, which is why part of the reason North got their ass kicked for so long, until they finally all got together.
You got on the same
just
page.
manpower kind of won that war. But
that's a true
But
fact.
it was a horrific. I mean, it was a great idea in theory.
Yeah.
Horrific in execution for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's having a dysfunctional cabinet is nothing new. What I would say is just, I think he just picked a bunch of morons. Where I would say he picked some smart people who just ideologically disagree.
Yeah,
don't like each
that's
other,
yeah.
but were reasonably competent, with maybe the exception of Chase, who just plundered the government for shoe contracts. You know, you could make an argument that everybody else was pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, and I honestly believe the Democrats are setting this up for a constitutional violation, on which case they have the grounds to file impeachment charges at that point, which will be interesting to see what happens. Because what was so fascinating about the judge in Washington reversing the travel ban was there was a judge in Boston who upheld the travel ban on the same day. You know, so but the fact that his own departments all of a sudden decide to acknowledge the one in Washington is very, very interesting.
It is interesting.
And if he pushes it too far and ignored the judge in Washington, he felt he could have been facing a very, very real constitutional crisis at that point of how much power does the president really have, actually. And that would have set up a showdown, which I don't think he's prepared to have. They would have booted his ass out of office. And I think Republicans don't like him either, so they would have gone along with him.
Well, now that you broached that subject, this is interesting. I'm sorry.
Oh.
8 U.S. Code 1182, inadmissible aliens. Suspensions of entry, imposition of restrictions by President. Whenever the President finds that the entry of any aliens of any class or any aliens of the United States would be detrimental to the interest of the United States, he may proclaim for such a period as he deems necessary, suspend entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate. So,
but you cannot do it on religious grounds. That's been a long-standing.
There's a lot of argument in that, but it is in the code that he can do it.
No, not to.
And a lot of other presidents did it. You know, this don't forget Obama. 2 weeks before the end of the presidency, he said no more Cubans.
Again, not on a religious ground. And I think the argument that you would make here is that this basically feels like a religious ground, especially when you have him banning 7 basically Muslim countries and saying, but we still like the Christians a lot, so we'll give them a priority. That automatically sets you up for a violation of the Constitution at that point. And
but it is an interesting provision.
I'm not saying yes or no he overstepped his boundaries as president by saying these are the conditions under which you get a visa. What I am saying is that the rationale he used to do it may be in violation of the Constitution, and had he ignored a federal judge.
We had this conversation before.
Yeah,
and I'm going to give you the same answer I gave you before. He stepped on his dick.
Yeah, and violating a federal judge's order would be a huge, huge problem for him right now that he is not prepared to win.
I think the fact that we have POTUS staff tweets or whatever it's going to be, along with many other things, this will not be the first. There will be others that will do the same thing if this one somehow gets squashed. But the fact that we're wondering, is this true? And again, it's that healthy dose of skepticism. It's probably not, just for what it's worth. But the fact that we have that, God bless the internet. Yeah, it gives us this awesome capability to do these amazing things. And the question you've got on here, where is it? Something about the resistance.
Yeah, there is a really good one.
Have these sour grapes protests turned into the resistance?
Yeah, it's in a different area. But this is a mild form of it. Yeah, I don't think it's got to a place where resistance, traditionally globally resistance means something very different.
Yeah.
But on the way in, music is a big part of this. I was just channel surfing and hit Games Without Frontiers with old Peter Gabriel.
Oh, yeah.
War Without Tears.
Yeah.
If looks could kill, they probably will. We're at a place where we're actually looking at something similar to what that was postulating.
Yeah.
But we've got a situation that is so crazy and chaotic that we're willing to believe that there's insiders in there telling us what's going on through Twitter. And the president himself uses this stuff. The president uses Twitter. Oddly enough, he's gone silent lately, which is really curious as to what's going on.
Right.
Oh no, I'm about to leave, so I just brought it up.
So, I think it's awesome. Whether it's real or not, I think it's absolutely awesome because, again, and I said this last time, that's what this country is all about, is the capability to dissent non-violently, and I like the way they put it. If you're violent, we're going to kick you out. Great.
Right.
That's what. Again, that should be the same thing. You should be able to handle yourself with civil discourse.
Yeah.
But I think that there's going to be a lot of that, and there should be some on the other side that balances it out. But the overall concept of doing something like that, the fact that we can go to some other countries around the world, you would not be allowed to do that. You'd be found, shot, and killed.
Mm-hmm. Now the interesting thing about Berkeley, and
Don't look at these yet. But keep going. Don't look at them yet.
He said don't look at him
You
yet.
can't look ahead on the pop quiz.
What I say?
the interesting thing about Berkeley is that
I don't think he was ready to move
everybody get one.
topics. I've seen him.
Oh,
I got one.
I don't know if these are ever
I
seen.
think it's a whole package.
Just two of them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two. Okay. All right.
the interesting thing about Berkeley is that it's been reported that the students
He got one and nothing small.
that the students were the one that lit up the place and burned it down and everything else. But that's not true. It's not true at all. That's false news. What happened at Berkeley when Milo
Fox News.
showed up? What's that?
Did you say that was Fox News?
False.
Is that what you said?
Oh, yeah, it was false news. Very much so.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure.
What happened when Milo showed up? Milo's a gay man. Has been very successful, and he bangs against the LGBT narrative some. So they instituted a protest where they had a band and an LGBT dance party. And it was all sanctioned by the university and everything was fine. There was nothing wrong with what they did. Not a thing wrong. They did a legitimate protest. What happens is that they had 150 estimated of these anarchists showed up from the Bay Area. Because the problem with UNC Berkeley, or whatever UC Berkeley, is that it's located way too close to San Francisco. And these slugs showed up, and they're dressed in black, and they even got black face masks on.
Yeah.
Does that make them any difference than a damn KKK in the opposite sense? Really, no. And they turned around and bombed the place, and bomb's not the right word, but they burned and threw rocks at the cops and raised hell, and then took off and then left the students to take the blame.
But they've done that everywhere.
And they do this everywhere.
They do
They're
that
paid
everywhere.
protesters. They're
Yes.
trained protesters.
Portland we protest all the time, and the protests in Portland rarely have any issue whatsoever until the anarchists show up and start causing problems. And
this
this protest gets blamed for the violence.
This is a huge problem. And there's only one, and here's what really boggled my mind. I read about it a couple of days later, and there were no arrests. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. No, you round these people up and you arrest them, and you prosecute them, and you throw them in jail for a period of time. You make their life difficult. You make them cost that they have to pay you money because they screwed up.
You mean the guys in the ski masks who were doing stuff who then ran into the alley and took it off and changed clothes real quick and then walked out in the crowd like normal?
Yep.
It happened during Trump's inauguration. They had a bunch of peaceful protests, and the anarchists came in and set a limo on fire and broke business windows and everything else. These are the anarchists, and these people need to be arrested, and they need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This has nothing to do with the peaceful protesters.
So I would love that.
That's what I think about it.
Too easy to hide.
All right. So last thing I want to talk about is I've heard from a lot of people over the period since the election about kind of how, anarchists aside, how the protesters have been characterizing Trump and the way the language they use in their signs and it got me to thinking. I didn't hear a lot of protest to the same thing under our former president. And so what your packet is, you turn those over.
Okay.
These are examples of signs that were carried around to protest Obama.
You need that.
You need them. Oh, you got it. To protest Obama. And the second piece was actually something I found on Pinterest that was a Pinterest page basically set up to demonize our former First Lady. So I know you guys at home can't see, but I'm going to kind of quickly describe.
Tell them what you searched.
Oh, so, and literally, I got 2 packets here, and I literally did one search. It was for racist protest signs against Obama.
Okay.
This is the first stuff that popped up. I didn't even dig deep. Like I printed maybe the first 12 or 15 that I saw, and then I happened to run across this Pinterest
Sorry,
page.
they're not all
again.
facing the same direction.
No, they're not.
So that got you on at least one list.
Yeah. I'm sure it did. But so the first
Probably
picture
not.
is just a picture of President Obama and his wife, but they have monkey faces. The second picture says, which I thought was interesting because this seems to be the sentiment of the people that were protesting Obama, in that her sign says, it doesn't matter what my sign says, the press will call it racist. Not thinking that maybe it is racist, but the press will call it racist no matter what I have.
Walks like a duck.
Another one was Obama Go Home, and which got me to thinking, what is home? The third one is Curious George, but it says Obama and holding a banana. It says Obama in 08.
Yeah, I like the spelling on this one.
I know.
Obama, half-breed, Muslim.
Muslin. So he's
He's a piece of fabric.
he's part fabric. Yeah, I got
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
If somebody holds up a sign like that, do you really expect them to be very educated, or do you expect them to be narrow-minded?
Well, I'm sure that they're narrow-minded. I guess what I'm saying is, I've heard a lot of people say, that the protesters should go away. That are protesting Trump now. But I guess what I'm saying is, the signs that are being held up at Trump rallies aren't near as bad as anything that I'm showing the group here. And where was the same outrage? I think when it's policy that's your problem, you don't have these signs. You have, we hate TPP, don't sign it. Well, you have, a dozen other things, but, we need a Christian president, which, of course, Obama was, but, the sign is leading you to believe otherwise. A picture of Obama with undocumented worker. It's and I'm not going to even go down the entire list. But I guess what I'm saying is, what we're seeing in the protests, and I haven't even gotten to the second packet, which is a Pinterest page that's dedicated to horrible memes against Michelle Obama, and the Pinterest page out there is even called "Ugly Evil Sasquatch." I guess what I am saying is that protesting is American. It is what it is. But when you are at this point and you are insinuating that the first couple are monkeys, when you're insinuating that they're not from here, when you're insinuating that they are not Christian, when you're out and out saying that he should go home, which Chicago versus the signs that you're seeing for Trump, which is talking about not banning Muslims. Holy,
Wow! I don't even. I'm speechless.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. Like literally, I didn't even dig. I didn't, because you know how when you Google search and then you can go to the next page and the next page. This is the stuff that popped up on the first page, and the sign that he's talking about has a hangman's noose and says "Hang in there, Obama." I guess what I'm saying is maybe, just maybe, we have to, and I asked this question on the last podcast, but I think right now it's the only question that actually matters, and that is, are we America? Do we tolerate this behavior for one person because he's not the same skin tone as the vast majority of the population? Or do we condemn it all when it goes too far? I'm not saying that no protests, no signs against Trump have gone too far, because I am more than positive that they have. But the reason that on top of the fact that there was just an astounding run of murders, the reason that the Black Lives Matters movement was so angry, the reason that so much of these protests are so angry, goes back to these signs that nobody protested when we had our first black president. Now that we've got our businessman president, I'm just hearing a lot of give him time. And I'm not saying we shouldn't give him time, because I do think no matter what administration comes in, you give them time to see how it shakes out, so that you know whether or not they're going to do a good job or if they need to be impeached or whatever. What I am saying is, if we can't be civil in our disobedience, are we still America? Or have we become a third world country? And if we've become a third world country, isn't it time for the resistance? And on that thought, I want to end this podcast in the way I end all podcasts. And that is with the quote that started off for me. And this is, to good times with good people.